The world was quiet. Too quiet. Sergeant Marcus Hale stepped carefully through the ruins of the alien city, his boots crunching against broken stone and shattered glass. Smoke rose in thin columns all around him, drifting lazily into the pale sky. Hours ago, this place had been a battlefield. Now it was only wreckage, an empty graveyard left behind after the war machines pulled back. The war was over. Or at least, this part of it was. The coalition of alien armies had withdrawn and even the human fleet had moved on to regroup. But Marcus had been left behind with a small squad, tasked with searching for survivors or dangerous technology. He didn't mind. He preferred walking, through the ruins to sitting in a noisy camp where generals argued over maps. Out here there was silence, and silence gave him space to think. As he turned a corner, Marcus raised his rifle out of habit. The alien structures loomed above him, cracked towers of pale stone and glowing crystal. Once this city must have been beautiful. He imagined tall spires shining in the sunlight, markets buzzing with alien voices, and children running through the streets. Now, the air was heavy with ash, and the only sound was the distant hum of cooling machines. He sighed, lowering his rifle. Another ghost town, he muttered. But then he heard something. At first it was faint, just a rustle, like wind stirring debris. Marcus froze, his instincts sharp from years of fighting. Slowly he scanned the shadows. A fallen archway cast long lines of shade across the road. Beneath it something shifted again. Not wind, not rubble, something alive. Marcus raised his weapon carefully and approached. His footsteps were steady, each crunch of gravel loud in the still air. "Hello?" he called softly. His voice echoed in the ruins. "If anyone's there, I'm not here to hurt you. I just need to know you're not a threat." There was no answer. But when he moved closer, he finally saw her. A child. She was curled against the stone, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her skin shimmered faintly, not like human skin at all. It glowed faint blue in patches, as if light was flowing beneath the surface. Her hair, long and tangled, shone silver where the sun touched it. And her eyes, large, wide, and filled with fear, watched Marcus as if he were the most dangerous thing in the universe. Marcus froze, lowering his rifle at once. "Easy," he whispered, crouching down. "I'm not going to hurt you." The girl flinched. She pressed herself tighter, against the wall, trembling. Marcus could see she was young, no more than 10, maybe 12 in human years. She wore what looked like a tattered ceremonial robe, now ripped and dirty. A faint symbol was stitched at the collar, but Marcus didn't recognize it. He knew one thing, though. She was alone. "Where are your people?" he asked gently. "Did they leave you behind?" The girl didn't answer. She only stared at him with those glowing eyes. Marcus took off his helmet slowly, letting her see his face. His hair was damp with sweat, his expression calm. "See? I'm human, not one of the machines, not one of the soldiers who hurt your city, just me." The girl blinked, tilting her head slightly as if studying him. She still didn't speak. Marcus set his rifle on the ground, pushing it away from him. Then he pulled a small ration pack from his belt and held it out. "Food," he said simply. "You must be hungry." Her eyes flicked from his face to the pack. For a long moment she hesitated. Then slowly she reached out with trembling hands and took it. She opened it clumsily, sniffed the contents, and began to eat. Marcus watched her quietly. Relief spread through him. She wasn't hostile. She wasn't dangerous. Not in the way the coalition claimed. She was just a child, scared and abandoned in a city of ruins. "Good," he murmured. "That's better, isn't it?" For the first time, he saw the hint of something in her eyes. Trust, faint and fragile. Over the next hour, Marcus stayed with her. He tried speaking using simple words and slow gestures. She didn't reply, but she listened, tilting her head as if learning. When he pointed at himself and said, "Marcus," she repeated it softly, her voice light and musical. Mar. Cuss. The sound startled him. Her voice was delicate, almost like a song. It had been so long since he'd heard anything so gentle in the middle of war. He smiled faintly. That's right. Marcus. She hesitated, then placed a hand on her chest. Elira, she whispered. Her name. Marcus nodded, repeating it carefully. Elira. Her eyes softened just a little, as if the simple act of someone saying her name gave her strength. As night fell, Marcus set up a small camp in the shelter of the broken towers. He lit a tiny heat lamp and gave Elira his spare blanket. She sat close to him, still cautious, but no longer trembling. He knew what his orders said. Humans were supposed to avoid contact with alien survivors, especially ones marked by strange abilities or unknown heritage. The Coalition had strict rules. Some children were considered too dangerous, carrying powers linked to ancient weapons. Those children were left behind, or worse. But Marcus couldn't do it. He couldn't walk away. Not after seeing her eyes filled with fear and loneliness. As he watched her fall asleep beside the firelight, he whispered to himself, I won't leave you, not like the others did. The ruins were silent, but for the first time Marcus didn't feel alone. And though he couldn't explain why, he knew this girl, this Elira, was important. Not just to him, but maybe to the entire galaxy, because, while everyone else had abandoned her, he had chosen to stay, and that choice would change everything. The night passed slowly. Marcus barely slept. He sat awake beside the fading glow of his heat lamp, listening to the faint breaths of the alien girl who lay wrapped in his spare blanket. The ruins around them were silent, broken towers leaning, like old giants, their shadows stretching across the cracked streets. Every sound, a stone shifting, the distant groan of falling rubble, made him tighten his grip on his rifle. But the girl slept soundly. She had curled close to the fire, her silver hair shimmering in the dim light, her small hands clutching the blanket as if afraid it might vanish. Marcus studied her in silence. Her name echoed in his thoughts. Elira. It was a soft name, light on the tongue. Unlike the harsh sounds of military code, he whispered it once to himself quietly, just to hear it. She stirred slightly in her sleep but did not wake. Marcus leaned back against a broken wall, his eyes heavy but his mind restless. Orders told him to leave her. Orders told him she was not his responsibility. But Marcus had lived through enough campaigns to know the truth. Sometimes orders were wrong. At dawn, he rose and stretched. The air was cold and smelled faintly of smoke. Elira woke too, blinking her glowing eyes against the morning light. She sat up slowly, looking around as though checking the ruins to see if anyone else had come. When she saw Marcus still there, her shoulders relaxed slightly. Morning, he said gently. She tilted her head, not understanding the word, but his calm tone seemed enough. He handed her a fresh ration pack. She accepted it without hesitation this time, opening it carefully. As she ate, Marcus crouched nearby, trying again to build a bridge of words. He pointed at himself. Marcus. She swallowed and repeated softly, Cuss. He smiled. Then he pointed at her. Elira. Her eyes brightened. She tapped her chest and said, Elira. They practiced the names back and forth, their voices carrying lightly in the empty streets. She began to laugh, just a little, when Marcus exaggerated the sounds, pretending to get them wrong. It was a small laugh, fragile but real, and it filled the ruins with something brighter than the rising sun. For the first time in days, Marcus felt like he was hearing life instead of death. Later that morning, Marcus scouted the area. He didn't want to leave Elira alone, but he needed to know if enemy patrols were nearby. The coalition armies had pulled back, but he doubted they had completely abandoned the region. And if they found her, he didn't want to think about what might happen. When he returned, he found Elira crouched near the heat lamp, humming softly. Her hands moved in patterns above the device, her fingertips glowing faintly. To Marcus's surprise, the broken, Lamp flickered back to life, shining brighter than before. He stopped in his tracks, staring. What did you just do? Alira looked up, startled. She pulled her hands back quickly, as if she had done something wrong. Marcus walked closer, crouching beside her. The lamp was glowing steady, stronger than its design should allow. He reached out and touched it. It was warm, perfectly functioning. He looked back at her. You fixed it, didn't you? She hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. Marcus sat back, slowly, his thoughts racing. She hadn't used tools, hadn't opened the device. She had just touched it, and it worked. So this was why the others abandoned her. Not because she was weak, but because she was different. Alira hugged her knees, watching him nervously, as if expecting him to turn away like the rest. But Marcus didn't move. He only said, softly but firmly, "That's incredible." Her eyes widened, surprise flickering across her face. No one had ever called her gift that before. As the day went on, Marcus made a decision. He couldn't leave her here. She wouldn't survive alone, and even if she could, she didn't deserve that fate. That evening, as they sat near the fire again, he spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. "Alira," he began. She looked up at him. "I can't stay here, forever. The war will move. Soldiers will come back. It won't be safe. But I won't leave you." She didn't understand all the words, but she seemed to sense his meaning. Her eyes softened, and she leaned a little closer, as if seeking reassurance. Marcus placed a hand gently on his chest. "I promise," he said clearly. Then he pointed at her. "You. Safe." For a moment she just stared. Then, hesitantly, she reached out and placed her small hand over his. Her glowing eyes locked on his face, and though she said nothing, the gesture was enough. She understood. The next few days passed in uneasy rhythm. Marcus led Alira through the ruins, searching for supplies. They moved carefully, always staying in the shadows, avoiding open streets. Alira followed him closely, her steps light and quiet. She was quick to learn his signals. A raised hand meant stop, a pointed finger meant move. She was no soldier, but she was observant. She adapted. At night, they spoke more. Slowly, Marcus taught her words, simple ones, like food, water, safe, and danger. She repeated them carefully, her voice soft but eager to learn. Each word was a step closer to bridging the gap between them. But danger was never far. One afternoon, as they searched a collapsed market, Marcus heard the distant hum of engines. He froze, motioning for Alira to hide. She obeyed instantly, slipping into the shadows of a broken stall. Marcus crouched low, peering through the rubble. Across the horizon, dark shapes moved. Drones, hovering silently as they scanned the ruins. Coalition machines. His jaw tightened. They weren't supposed to be here. If they found Alira, there would be no mercy. He waited until the machines passed, his heart pounding, then returned to Alira. She was trembling, but when she saw him, relief washed over her face. Marcus knelt beside her. "It's all right. You're safe." She whispered the word back to him, halting but clear. "Safe." Marcus smiled faintly, though inside he was filled with determination. He had made a promise, and he meant to keep it. That night, as Alira slept, Marcus sat awake again, staring at the stars above the broken towers. He thought of Earth, of the people back home who had no idea this child existed. He thought of the coalition armies who saw her as a danger to be erased, and he thought of his own choice, staying here, protecting her even if it meant defying his orders. He whispered into the quiet night, more to himself than to her. "They all abandoned you, but I won't. I promise, Alira. As long as I live, you'll never be alone again." The stars gave no answer, but Marcus felt the weight of his words settle in his chest. It was not just a promise, it was a bond, and from that night onward, it would guide every step he took. The ruins were no longer silent. For days, Marcus and Elira had managed to move quietly through the broken city, keeping away from patrols. They lived on scraps of food, shared water from cracked pipes, and slept under the shelter of fallen towers. But the machines had returned in greater numbers. Every night, Marcus could hear the low hum of their engines in the distance drawing closer. The coalition was searching for something, or someone, and Marcus knew exactly who they wanted. That morning, he led Elira through the old marketplace, weaving carefully through shattered stalls. The air smelled of rust and dust, heavy with the weight of abandonment. Marcus kept his rifle ready, his eyes sharp, scanning every shadow. Elira followed closely, her small hand clutching the back of his armor. "Stay close," he whispered. She nodded silently, her silver hair catching the weak sunlight. Her glowing eyes darted nervously across the ruins as if she could sense danger even before he did. Suddenly the sound came, loud, mechanical, echoing down the street, the steady beat of rotor blades. Marcus froze, pulling Elira into cover, behind a fallen column. Above them, a drone passed. It was sleek and black, with a cluster of glowing lenses scanning the rubble below. Its searchlight swept across the street, pausing on broken walls and burned vehicles. Marcus held his breath, pressing Elira close against the stone. He could feel her trembling. Slowly, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Her small fingers clutched his sleeve tightly. The drone hovered for a moment longer, then moved on, vanishing into the sky. Marcus exhaled, whispering, "That was too close." Elira whispered back one of the words she had learned. "Danger." He looked at her, surprised, then smiled faintly. "That's right, danger." But the danger was far from over. By noon, they reached the outer edge of the city. From there, Marcus could see the plains beyond, wide stretches of dry earth littered with wreckage from the war. Tanks and walkers lay in ruin, their husks blackened by fire. It was open ground, dangerous to cross, but if they stayed in the city, the patrols would eventually corner them. He crouched, studying the horizon. "We'll have to move fast," he muttered. Elira tugged at his sleeve, pointing back toward the city. Marcus frowned. At first he thought she was scared of leaving the ruins, but then he heard it too, the distant whine of engines. This time, not just one drone, many. His stomach tightened. They were closing in. He turned to her quickly. "We move. Now." They sprinted across the open ground, weaving between wreckage for cover. Marcus kept his rifle ready, scanning the skies. Elira ran beside him, her small feet light on the cracked earth. Despite her fear, she kept up with him, her determination stronger than her size. Then the sound came again, drones swooping low. Searchlights cut across the plain, beams of white slicing through the dust. Marcus pulled Elira behind a wrecked walker just as the lights swept past. The machines were hunting them. "We can't stay out here," Marcus whispered, glancing at the wreck. Its metal hull was torn open, forming a dark passage inside. He motioned for Elira to crawl through. She obeyed quickly, slipping into the wreckage. Marcus followed, his rifle ready. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with smoke and burned wires. They crouched in silence as the drones passed overhead, their engines humming like angry wasps. Elira pressed against Marcus's side, her glowing, eyes wide with fear. He whispered, "Quiet. They'll pass." Minutes dragged by. The machines hovered outside, scanning, searching. Then slowly the sound faded into the distance. Marcus let out a breath of relief. But he knew it was temporary. The coalition wouldn't stop. They were tightening the net, pushing the search harder every day. That night, they found shelter in a cave at the base of a rocky ridge. The cave was shallow but hidden, its mouth covered by fallen stones. Marcus built a small fire, shielding the glow with loose rocks. Elira sat close, her knees tucked to her chest. She looked at him, her voice soft. "Why, chase?" Marcus paused. She was learning faster now, forming short questions. He looked into the fire, then back at her. "They're afraid of you," he said simply, Afraid of what you can do. Her glowing eyes lowered, sadness clouding them. She whispered, "Alone. I'll leave." Marcus's chest tightened. He reached over and rested a hand on her shoulder. "Not all. I didn't leave." She looked up at him, her eyes shimmering in the firelight. For the first time, she gave a small smile. It was faint, but real. Marcus nodded firmly. "I made you a promise, Alira, and I keep my promises." But the machines didn't rest. The next morning, the sound of engines returned, louder than before. Marcus woke instantly, pulling Alira deeper into the cave. He crouched at the entrance, peering through the rocks. What he saw made his blood run cold. Not just drones, ground units, mechanical walkers, tall and spider-like, moving steadily across the plain. Their sensors swept in wide arcs, their weapons ready. Behind them came smaller troops, armored figures with glowing visors. Coalition soldiers. "They've sent ground teams," Marcus muttered. Alira's small hand clutched his arm tightly. "Danger," she whispered. "Yes," he said grimly. "Big danger." The soldiers were moving straight toward the ridge, toward the cave. Marcus's mind raced. They couldn't stay hidden. Eventually, the patrols would find them. Their only chance was to move before the net closed completely. He grabbed his pack and rifle, turning to Alira. "We have to run. Stay close no matter what happens. Understand?" She nodded, fear in her eyes but also trust. They slipped out the back of the cave, climbing the rocky slope under the cover of shadows. The ground units drew closer, their heavy steps shaking the earth. Marcus pulled Alira along, his heart pounding with each sound of metal grinding below. Halfway up the ridge, a drone spotted movement. Its alarm shrieked through the air, and a beam of light locked onto them. "Run!" Marcus shouted. They sprinted up the slope as gunfire tore into the rocks. Shards of stone exploded around them. Marcus shielded Alira with his body, pushing her forward. She stumbled but kept moving, determination burning in her glowing eyes. At the top of the ridge, Marcus spun and fired his rifle, taking down the drone. It fell in a burst of sparks, but more were coming. "Keep going," he urged. Alira reached the crest, turning back to him. Her hands glowed faintly, light shimmering between her fingers. For a moment, Marcus saw fear and courage mix in her face. She raised her hands toward the approaching machines. A pulse of energy burst from her palms, invisible at first, then glowing bright. The ground shook as the coalition's machines staggered, their sensors flickering. Several collapsed, sparks flying from their joints. Marcus stared in shock. She had stopped them. Alira gasped, falling to her knees, exhausted. Marcus ran to her, pulling her into his arms. "You did it," he whispered. "You saved us." She looked up at him weakly, whispering one word: "Safe." He held her tightly, his heart heavy with both pride and fear. Her power was real, stronger than he had imagined. And now the coalition would stop at nothing to find her. As the smoke cleared on the battlefield below, Marcus looked out across the horizon. They were no longer just running. They were being hunted. And the hunt had only just begun. The sun was setting when Marcus finally allowed them to rest. After the battle on the ridge, he had pushed Alira to keep moving. They had crossed dry plains, climbed rocky ground, and hidden in the shadows of broken vehicles. The coalition would not stop searching, and Marcus knew they had to stay ahead. Still, Alira was just a child. Her small body grew weary, and her steps slowed with each mile. At last, he found a sheltered valley where jagged cliffs blocked the horizon. A shallow cave rested at the base of the rocks, hidden from view. It wasn't much, but it was safe for the night. "Here," Marcus said softly, helping Alira sit. She sank against the stone, her silver hair tangled, her glowing eyes dim with exhaustion. He lit a small fire, careful to keep it low. The warm light flickered across the cave walls, chasing away the cold. Alira curled near the flames, her arms wrapped around her knees. She was quiet, But Marcus could tell her mind was full. He studied her in silence. The image of what he had, seen on the ridge, still burned in his memory, the energy bursting from her hands, knocking machines out of the sky. It wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It was power, pure and undeniable. And he needed to know why. When she had eaten, Marcus crouched in front of her. His voice was calm, steady. "Elira," he began, "what you did. The light from your hands. How?" She looked at him, uncertain. Her glowing eyes wavered. For a moment she said nothing, as if afraid to speak. Marcus softened his voice. "It's all right, I'm not afraid of you, I just want to understand." Elira hesitated, then placed her small hand on the ground. Faint light shimmered beneath her skin, spreading like a ripple into the stone. The firelight caught the glow, painting the cave walls with soft blue. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Gift." Marcus frowned. "A gift?" She nodded slowly. "From makers," the word struck him. "Makers? Who are the makers?" She struggled with the language, but she pressed her hand against her chest. "Long ago, my people, chosen." Marcus leaned closer. "Chosen for what?" Her eyes glimmered, sadness filling them. She whispered, "Forge." Marcus froze. The word was familiar. During his time with the military, he had heard rumors, ancient structures scattered across the galaxy, built before most civilizations even existed. They were called star forges, machines powerful enough to build fleets, weapons, even cities. No one alive knew how to use them. They were mysteries, guarded by coalitions too afraid to unlock them. But this child, she had just said forge. Marcus's thoughts raced. Could it be true? Could Elira's people have been linked to the forges? That would explain everything. The coalition's fear, their determination to erase her existence. If she could activate one of those structures, she could change the balance of the galaxy. He looked at her carefully. "Your people. They left you, didn't they?" Elira's eyes dimmed. She lowered her head, her voice soft. "Afraid. All afraid. Alone." Marcus felt a sharp ache in his chest. He reached out, gently lifting her chin so she would meet his eyes. "You're not alone anymore," he said firmly. "Do you hear me? Not while I'm here." She blinked, and for the first time he saw tears shining in her glowing eyes. That night Marcus lay awake, staring at the cave ceiling. His mind refused to rest. The revelation changed everything. Elira wasn't just a lost child. She was the last of something greater, an heir to a forgotten legacy. If the coalition captured her, they wouldn't just silence her. They would bury an entire piece of history, one that could shape the future of countless worlds. He turned his head and looked at her. She was sleeping peacefully, her breathing slow, her hair spilling like silver across the blanket. She looked so fragile, so small, but inside her was a power greater than armies. Marcus whispered to himself, "They don't get to decide your fate. You do." And with that, he made another promise in the quiet of the night. Whatever secrets the forges held, whatever danger it brought, he would protect her until she had the chance to choose her own path. The next day, they continued moving. The land grew rougher, the ruins older. Here the ground was scattered with strange metallic pillars, half buried in dust. Elira touched them as they walked, and each time, the metal flickered faintly with light. Marcus noticed. "These things, they react to you." She nodded. "Makers. Built." "Your people built these too?" "Yes." The pillars seemed to hum under her touch, like they recognized her presence. Marcus felt a chill. The world itself seemed alive around her, waiting for her command. By evening, they reached the edge of a canyon. At its heart stood something enormous, an ancient structure, black and silver, half buried in the ground. Its walls were smooth, its spires curved like blades reaching toward the sky. Marcus stopped in awe. "A forge," he whispered. He had seen pictures in old reports, but never with his own eyes. The size alone was overwhelming. It dwarfed mountains, casting long shadows across the canyon floor. Its surface glowed faintly, as though still alive after countless centuries. Elira stood beside him, staring at it with wide eyes. Her voice was soft, trembling. "Home." Marcus looked at her sharply. "This is where you're from?" She shook her head slowly. "Not home, but ours." She took a step forward, her glowing eyes locked on the forge. The faint light in her skin pulsed brighter, as if answering the structure. Marcus grabbed her shoulder gently. "Wait, it could be dangerous." But she shook her head, her voice filled with quiet certainty. "Not danger. Calling." Marcus hesitated. Every instinct as a soldier screamed to pull her back, but the trust in her eyes stopped him. She wasn't afraid. She belonged here. They descended into the canyon together. As they approached, the forge seemed to awaken. Lines of blue light rippled across its surface, glowing brighter with each of Elira's steps. The ground trembled faintly, as if recognizing her presence. At the base of the structure, a door opened with a low hum. Dust spilled as ancient mechanisms came to life for the first time in ages. Marcus raised his rifle, tense. Careful, but Elira walked forward without fear. She turned back to him once, her expression calm. Safe. He followed, though. Every muscle in his body was tight with caution. Inside, the forge glowed with light. Tall walls curved into arches above them, covered in symbols Marcus couldn't read. The air was thick with energy, humming softly, like a heartbeat. Elira stepped to the center, placing her hand on a pedestal. The entire chamber pulsed with light in answer. Images burst into the air, holograms, shifting shapes of galaxies, fleets, and worlds. Marcus gasped, his eyes wide. It was knowledge, a library of forgotten history. Elira's voice was quiet, but certain. "Makers, left for me." Marcus stared at her. The truth settled heavy on his shoulders. She wasn't just the last of her kind. She was the key to an inheritance older than human history. The Coalition had abandoned her out of fear, but standing here, Marcus saw not fear, but possibility. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll protect it. Together." But even as he spoke, his soldier's instincts stirred uneasily. Far in the distance, carried faintly on the wind, came the sound of engines. The Coalition had found them again. The forge was alive. Blue light ran like rivers across its walls, pulsing in time with Elira's touch. The air was filled with low humming, as if the ancient structure itself was breathing again after 1,000 years of silence. Symbols floated. In the air, galaxies, stars, ships, and weapons Marcus could hardly understand. But even in this moment of wonder, Marcus's ears caught something else. A sound he dreaded. Engines. Distant at first, then louder, heavy, mechanical, steady. The Coalition had found them. Marcus grabbed his rifle, instincts snapping into place. He moved quickly to the entrance of the forge, scanning the canyon. Across the horizon, dark shapes appeared. Walkers marched slowly, their legs cutting deep into the earth. Drones swarmed above them, their searchlights sweeping the cliffs. And behind them, lines of soldiers advanced, armored and ready. They had come in force, not to study, not to negotiate, to take Elira. Marcus clenched his jaw. Of course, they couldn't stay away. Behind him, Elira stood near the pedestal, the glow of the forge shining around her. She looked at him with wide eyes, her voice soft. "Danger?" He gave a sharp nod. "Yes, big danger. But we'll face it." Her small hands trembled. "Run?" Marcus shook his head firmly. "No, If we run, they'll never stop. This time we stand. The machines closed in. The sound of engines filled the canyon, echoing off the walls like thunder. Marcus adjusted his rifle, his heart steady. He had fought many battles, but none like this. This wasn't about land or orders or victory. It was about one promise. He glanced back at Elira. She stood tall despite her fear, her silver hair catching the glow of the forge. In that moment, she looked less like a child and more like a symbol, fragile, but unbroken. Marcus called to her over the hum of the forge. "You're not what they say you are, you're more. They're afraid because they don't understand. But I do, and I won't let them take you." Her glowing eyes filled with trust. "Promise?" He nodded, his voice hard. "Promise." The first drones swept into the canyon, their lights locking onto the forge. Weapons powered up, their barrels glowing. Marcus fired first, his rifle sparking in the dark. One drone fell, then another. The air filled with the roar of battle, metal crashing and sparks flying. Elira pressed her hands against the pedestal, and the forge responded. Light surged across the walls, and energy shields rippled into existence around the chamber. Dirsha. Drones' blasts struck the shields and scattered, unable to break through. Marcus glanced at her in shock. "You can control it!" Elira's voice trembled. "Forge listens." The coalition forces pushed harder. Walkers climbed into the canyon, their legs slamming against the ground. Soldiers advanced under the cover of their fire, shouting in voices Marcus couldn't understand. Marcus ducked behind cover, firing carefully. His rifle grew hot in his hands, but he refused to fall back. Every time he squeezed the trigger, he thought of his promise. "Not while I'm here. You'll never be alone again." But there were too many. He shouted over the chaos. "Elira, we can't hold forever." Her glowing eyes were steady. Not hold. Change. Marcus didn't understand at first. Change what? She looked at the forge, then at him. Future. The pedestal glowed brighter as Elira placed both hands on it. The chamber shook, the hum rising into a roar. Energy raced through the walls, flowing like rivers of light. Outside, the ground trembled. The coalition forces stumbled, their machines faltering. The forge was awakening fully. Marcus shielded his eyes as light burst from the top of the structure, shooting into the sky like a beacon. It pierced the clouds, spreading across the stars. The coalition froze. Their drones stopped firing, their walkers hesitated, their soldiers faltered. The light was not a weapon, it was a signal. Marcus turned to Elira. "What did you do?" Her voice was soft, filled with calm. "I chose." "Chose what?" "To wake them." Marcus frowned. "Wake who?" She pointed to the sky. "The forges. All connected." His breath caught. If this forge was part of a network, then her signal had reached them all. The galaxy had just felt her presence. The coalition commander's voice echoed through a loudspeaker, harsh and commanding. Though Marcus didn't understand the alien words, the meaning was clear. They wanted Elira surrendered. Now. Marcus stepped into the open, his rifle still in hand. He shouted back, his voice carrying across the canyon. "You left her. You all abandoned her. She doesn't belong to you anymore." The soldiers raised their weapons. Before they could fire, the forge responded again. Pillars of light erupted around Elira, forming a protective barrier. Energy surged outward, forcing the coalition back. Their machines collapsed, their weapons sputtering. Elira stood at the heart of it all, her glowing eyes bright, her silver hair flowing in the light. She looked at Marcus, her voice strong. Safe. The battle ended not with destruction, but with silence. The coalition forces, unable to break through, retreated slowly. Their machines limped away, their soldiers withdrawing under the weight of failure. The drones vanished into the clouds, leaving the canyon quiet again. Marcus lowered his rifle, his chest heaving. He could hardly believe it. Against an army, against impossible odds they had stood, And one. Elira stepped away from the pedestal, her steps unsteady. Marcus caught her before she could fall. She leaned against him, exhausted but smiling faintly. "They're gone," he whispered. She nodded weakly. "Safe." As the forge quieted, Marcus looked at her seriously. "They'll be back. Stronger. They won't stop." Elira's eyes glowed softly. "Then, we go. Others wait." Marcus frowned. "Others?" She pointed to the sky again. "Signal." Reached. Not alone now. His heart lifted. The thought was almost too much to believe. Other forges, other places, other secrets waiting to be found. She wasn't the last. She wasn't forgotten. Marcus smiled faintly. "Then we'll go together." That night, as they rested within the forge, Marcus sat awake beside her once more. He thought of everything: the ruined city, the endless chase, the battle in the canyon. He thought of the promise he had made and how it had carried them this far. He looked at Elira, already asleep, her face peaceful in the glow of the forge. She was still a child, but now she carried hope not just for herself but for the galaxy. Marcus whispered quietly, his voice steady. "They all abandoned you, but I didn't. And I never will." The forge hummed softly in reply, like an old guardian keeping watch. And for the first time since the war began, Marcus felt something he hadn't in years: hope.